So, first of all, thank you so much for being here. You're being our first guest. I'm really, really excited, and I'm happy that it's you because we've known each other for quite some time. You're being
Mhm.
my tattoo artist.
Mhm.
And as we haven't decided yet whether we will be posting this video or not, would you mind describing yourself so the readers who don't know you yet have a better idea of who you are?
Of course. Well, my name is Mitchell Keanu. I'm a tattoo artist for about, I think, 2 to 3 years officially, and I've been tattooing for a little over 4 years now. Before I was a tattoo artist, I went to Art Academy here in Breda, which is a small city in the south, and I've successfully finished it, even though with some trials and errors. it the entire school took about 4 years, but and I studied illustration there. Most of the people in my class had a good understanding of how the entire process of an art academy and the study worked, but I sometimes had some doubts and some insecurities about how it all went and how the entire system was working for me, because like, yeah, on the one hand they were trying to teach me something, on the other hand they were criticizing my work on a in a way it sounded more personal, in a way like personal preferences, so, but all in all, I finished it, and yeah, since then I've never been stopping creating and drawing ever since.
Awesome. That sounds really good. And we will come back to your studying as well. But
Hmm.
first, because in our magazine, we want to share the artist's journey to
Hmm.
motivate and inspire people who just start out. Because, as you might have noticed, people like on social media usually post the best of. I do the same. So, like, no
Hmm.
judgment there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you start out, you look at other people's and you see only like the best of. And
Yeah,
sometimes you think, we forget that people who are already like successful in what they do, they also have been where we are right now. So
exactly.
yeah, so maybe if you go back, yeah, how did you get into drawing in the first place? Maybe like when you were small, or yeah, how did your journey begin?
Ooh, I have been drawing since I was really small. I think from the age of somewhere between 5 and 6 or so, and back then, with which is very obvious when you're a child, you have no idea when you're good or doing something great. You're just doing it for the sake of doing it, for the pleasure of it. And I always felt it was very soothing and relaxing, because I'm a very, and back then even more so, a very shy introverted kid. So when I had my papers and my crayons and my markers and all that, it was just me and my own little world and creating stuff, let my imagination flow. And it wasn't until I think about somewhere in elementary school when people started saying like, hey, your work is pretty good. And I had like no idea what they were talking about, because yeah, I had no idea what was good or not. I mean, if I were to draw, I don't know, like a flower or something, or a hand, it might resemble something in real life in some way, nowhere near as good, of course, but for the time being. And I think that's when I started to understand from, okay, so when something is pleasing to the eye or something resembles something from life, it may be considered good. So
Mhm.
that's when I really started to practice. And from an early age, even my parents were always trying to help me through that journey, always being honest, not just saying from, oh, it looks so well, but they were always giving feedback, in small ways and areas, to on a level you can give it to a child, of course, because I was very young. And yeah, I've never stopped doing that, actually. I just kept on working on my craft, even though I went to high school and to other schools. I never, or never, I haven't started studying in art classes or anything. I just went to school. I did my thing, and then it was only after high school I really started to look more creative education roads as it were, and that's when it really took off.
Is this when you decided that you want to do it like professionally, or did you just want to like start learning about it more, not knowing whether you would actually do it like as a job later?
Well, um, I did know for when I was young that I always wanted to do this professionally, but I never knew how you would do that because I didn't know about what kind of jobs existed when what about drawing in general. Like I didn't know what an illustrator was. When I was young, I only thought like, okay, I like comic books, so I just want to do that. I want to draw comic books for for a living, and I didn't know how it worked or something. But I thought, yeah, just that's just what I wanted to do. And I was getting older, around the age of I think 16, when I had to actually start choosing a school that's more fitting to your career path. Um, that's when I thought, okay, maybe I need to find a way to do this professionally, or at least learn how to do this professionally. There was a slight off track when I was choosing schools, because when I went to St. Lucas, which is in Boxtel, it's very close to Eindhoven, and there I started going more into the direction of animation and video editing and web design, because that was as close as I could get to doing something with drawing and imagery. You also had graphic design, but graphic design was more about, making cool magazines and posters and all that. It was more with letters and shapes. And I wanted to do actually something more with, creating form and movement. So I thought, okay, well, animation is also cool. So I would just do that. And then after finishing that school, that's when I went to the art academy, and then I was thinking, okay, animation was fun and all, but it's not. It doesn't have the same feeling to it for me as when I had it with illustrating and drawing in general. So that's when I really started to focus. Like, okay, you can work as an illustrator. There is a job description for that. The only downside is it's not as easy as a job as accounting or as I don't know, like a web designer. Like you can go to an office and request a job, and if you're there and get on your way. It's a lot harder than that. But I was like, yeah, that's problems for later. So I just want to focus now on my skills and honing them and practicing them. And that's when I really started to go through that path.
Awesome. And like you've been saying before, what were your like the struggles during the time at the academy? Do you still think like it's really good that you went to? Because I think many artists, I have a artist friend as well,
Hmm.
who doesn't know, do I need to go to the school? Can I do it on my own? Because like the creative world is really, yeah, you never know how you can make it, what you need to do. So what
Hmm.
are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing I really encountered was when I was going to the art academy. The first year is sort of an orientation year. So, like the first half, you're just doing like everything, from doing sculptures or writing or painting, like everything. And we didn't really had like specific classes. It was more conceptual in a sense. So, for example, one of the classes where we took was called 3D something something or 4D something something, and 3D was more about making things in 3D, and 4D was more about time and moving, maybe with imagery or recording or animation or something. And then 2D is obviously more like with painting and drawing and stuff. So those were the classes, and assignments assigned to that were a little bit specified on that. But it was way too abstract for me, like what I was supposed to do, because uh, maybe it was because of the school I went before that, or maybe because my brain works that way or something, but I needed some clarity to know, like, okay, just tell me what I want to do, what direction I have to go, and I'll do it. And they were like, yeah, you could try something with this and try something with that. And it was all kind of, yeah, like, just tell me. I don't know what you're trying to tell me. So, and that was the first year. And then after that, you actually choose, your path to which direction you want to go through, and I chose for illustration. And then along the way it became a lot more focused, of course, but that's when I started noticing that they were facilitating a lot of knowledge. Like if you want to learn about um, dot work or pointillism, or more with painting with oil paint or acrylic, you know, they show how you show it for maybe once or twice how you do it or how it works, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then they move on to the next thing, and then it was like, okay, so you touch the surface on some subject matters, and then afterwards it's just like, yeah, you work it out for yourself. And that's when I learned, okay, you all the teachers facilitate a lot, but on the other hand, you don't really, you know, drill us in some ways, you know, like the classical art academies from back then. And I had some, no, not necessarily some trouble with it, but I noticed that it became hard for me to actually choose something for myself, and more like, okay, do I find this fascinating, or are you just facilitating this, you know? And in a way, I found it really hard to, I don't know, just say, okay, I want to study this. For example, when they first show us how dot work and pointillism worked, I was like, cool, awesome. And I wanted to know more about it, and I wanted to do it more. And then they were like, okay, so next week we're going to use chalks and this and that and charcoal. And like, yeah, but we just focused on this, so can we just do this more, for example? And then I was like, okay, so it hit me that if you wanted to know something, you actually had to do it on your own and by yourself. And at first it was a little bit troublesome, but yeah, after a while I was like, you know what, if you want to do something, then just do it in your own way and focus on yourself. The only downside of it, I believe, is that you're missing a lot of fundamentals because no one is actually showing you how it works. You just have to figure it out for yourself. So the journey takes longer, but on the other hand, it makes it also a lot more worthwhile, I guess.
Yeah. So you had to like stick to your style and figure it out yourself then.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. The funny thing is, especially in the first few years, the word style
Mhm.
was forbidden. Like
Oh,
we could never use it, or even if we suggest that there was some resemblance of a style in our work, they were like, yeah, no, we don't do that yet, because you need to experiment and you have to look every direction before you're focusing on something. And then in the last year, in the graduation year, then there was some then we had to really work on our style. So for the first 3 years there was no such thing as your personal style, and then in the last year it was like, oh yeah, so but what is your writing, what is your style, you know, what is it, what is your work that makes you you? And I was like, now all of a sudden we have to have it, you know. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll better just start investigating that.
and now that we speak of style, how would you describe, did your style evolve? Especially like when you started to draw, because your style right now is based on like blacks and a bit darker art. How
Mhm.
did it evolve? When did it start?
I think the one consistent thing over all those years is the fact that I always used like black and gray, like
Mhm.
only pencils, sharpies, markers, fine liners. That's it. And that was also always the most fascinating thing for me. Even at art, during the art academy, I mostly focused on using like ink or gray wash or East Indian ink and stuff like that. Sure, I experimented with everything because it was kind of mandatory, but I always fell back to specifically working with black and ink and all that. So I think that is the most consistent part. And when it comes to my style in a sense of what imagery I use, or concepts and ideas I usually take on, I think that you grew more like after I went to school, because in some ways that's when your personal style and also your personal fascination start to grow, you know, because uh, when you're in school you're like in a sense told like on what you need to like, or what to know is good and what to know is bad. It's not necessarily like, okay, this one's good, this one's bad, but more like I had this feeling like I didn't really have my personal taste, but only like I've had to feel like, okay, this is supposed to be good because uh, for example, um, I graduated with a graphic novel, a very small one, And I took some inspiration of Frank Miller, who is a writer and comic book artist, and he is most known for his own personal works of Sin City. So one of my teachers said, "Okay, so investigate on that," and then I started to dive in his works a lot more, and I thought, okay, so his work is good because my work kind of resembles that, and because I find that as fascinating. So that is supposed to be good, and I still believe it, of course. But when you have no more, you don't have the trouble anymore of someone like actually telling you what to investigate, or not anything, not something to dive yourself into. Your view is getting a lot more broader in a sense, especially with social media nowadays, especially with Instagram. You can just like see everything, so that's when I first started to notice that everything is a lot different than when I went to the art academy, in a sense. And that's when I really start fascinating about certain things like Japanese stuff, or like more imagery of mythology, like Greek mythology or Norse mythology. Yeah, I think that's when I really started to see and find like what I personally find fascinating, and not necessarily what is supposed to be fascinating for my work or something, if
And
that makes sense.
of course, that makes a lot of sense. And when you think back, why was it like that your style was like it is right now? How did it come about? Did you have like maybe a memory, or like, I don't know, something that sparked it
hmm
that you thought, this is what I want to do?
um I think truthfully, it really started to kick off in a sense when I actually started uh, to start my tattoo journey, as
Mhm.
it were, as
Yeah.
becoming a tattoo artist. Because before that, in the small period between me graduating and working starting a tattoo apprenticeship, I had I was working full time, and I had a small studio I was sharing with two other old classmates of mine who
So
are
what did
still
you
very
work
good.
as
Sorry?
illustrator?
Yeah,
Did
as
you work-
illustrator, or rather, it's not necessarily like a working studio, but more like a private workplace where we can just do our own thing. And the other two had somewhat of more of a success than I had, because they actually had like some clients to work with. Like one of them worked for like a magazine, the other for the newspaper. So they actually had some client work, and I was just sitting there drawing in my spare time, and I was just drawing whatever I thought was fun, just to build up a portfolio. My girlfriend said, just post it on Instagram. You never know what comes of it. Just post it, just build up your portfolio. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. And I only, I just drew whatever thought I was drawn to, in the sense like, okay, I want to draw, I don't know, a skull or a wolf.
Mhm.
I just drew a wolf or a skull, and then I started my apprenticeship, and then I had this more broader view of what is happening in the world of tattooing, and especially nowadays with personal styles. Before it was like people could do like a little bit of everything, and now you really see that everyone has his own style and own findings. So, and then I was really starting, okay, so the tattoo artists nowadays really have their own style, and what is it that makes me then? And then I started to look to other tattoo artists, which I found like really great and awesome. For example, a guy in Brazil called Fredao Oliveira. He was one of the first big inspirations for me, and I really started to look at his work, not necessarily copying it, but just looking at his work in a sense like, okay, what is his style? What does he uses? He uses very dark work, animals with no eyes. And I'm like, okay, that's a cool element right there. A lot of portraits, And I was like, okay, this really resembles the kind of interest I also draw for myself. The styles aren't very similar, but the subjects are in a sense. So that's when I really started to grow into my own style as a tattoo artist. Just like, okay, this is how it works. And of course, the techniques are a lot different when it compares to skin and paper. But it was that time when I really thought like, okay, I have this as my drawing style, and how can I really push it through a tattooing style, as it were? And that was the point, especially during my apprenticeship days, when I really started to grow, as it were.
And what was the reasoning for going into tattooing? Because like not everybody who is like illustrator goes into this direction. What was your like your interest in tattooing?
Uh, well, to be honest, it wasn't really my personal interest. Um, I had a fascination with the tattoo lifestyle, of course. I had some tattoos on myself as well back then, but it wasn't necessarily that I thought, okay, that is something I should pursue. It was my girlfriend who actually, encouraged me to maybe do something with it, especially because she said like, hey, maybe your work is really good for tattooing. And I was like, I guess, I don't know. So she started pushing me a little bit into that direction in a good way, of course. So they, she and my and some of my friends even gave me like a tattoo starting kit with like two cheap machines and a pair of gloves and some needles and just to get me going, which is very nice, of course, but I was so scared to touch everything because like, yeah, I have no idea how this works. So I think I pulled it all together like one time, then pushed the machine on and I just got scared like, okay, no, I really shouldn't touch this, because I like the idea of it, but I don't think I'm in the in the right position to just start tattooing. I didn't have the courage to do that, and I had no idea what I had to do anyway. So, and I think not long after that, I got to know Hanne, which is one of the owners of Black Bear. We were both modeling for a common friend of ours, which was it was funny, but a little bit weird. But anyway, we got to know each other and she saw my work and I saw her work. Then not long after that moment, I got a message from her. She said, hey, we're looking for tattoo apprentices, and I remembered your work and I really liked it. So would you like to come by and have a chat with us? And I immediately sent this to my girlfriend. Like, I don't know if you had something to do with this, but I think it's happening. I think this is the course you're trying to set me on is like actually happening right now. And so I went there, and that is like exactly how. Yeah, I never um, I never stopped going, as it were.
Yeah.
I came and I stuck there. I
You
finished it
never
all.
left.
I never left. Exactly. Yeah.
What were like the first struggles of you? Like, how was it to start out? Like, because you said you were like afraid of touching the kit, and how was
hmm
it like actually doing it on a person? Then it's like I think it's even more stressful, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 I'm like always self-conscious about stuff, and I'm very insecure, especially when it comes to work. So the fact that my work had to come onto someone's skin was like terrifying for me. Like the whole idea I had to like harm someone to get some picture of mine on his skin was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. I think Kevin and Hannah really helped me along the way, especially during my early days, like just easing me into the process, and they gave me a lot of knowledge, and they did a really good job, like learning me the entire craft before I even started scratching some skin, as it were. And I remember that there was one day when I didn't thought I was ready, but apparently I was ready. And Kevin said like, "Oh, by the way, you can ask around some friends or family members, and you can start tattooing now if you want to." And I'm like, "Oh no, it's happening! It's really happening right now." So that was like the actual first struggle I had. Just overcoming that boundary of like actually tattooing someone. And my first tattoo was also on a guy who is now a great friend of mine also. He didn't have any tattoos either, so it was like a first for both of us, so we were both kind of nervous, and we're both like, okay, let's just do this, only one way through is forward. So we went on and did it, and after I think maybe 5 or 10 tattoos, then it became easier, just accepting the fact like this is the process. Yes, you're hurting people, but if you do a good job, then it all, yeah, the result is all well.
Mhm.
um besides that, I think the biggest struggle for me was finding a great deal of balance between how my compositions work between something on paper and something on the skin. Because as an illustrator, yeah, your boundaries are like limitless. It's you can draw whatever direction you want. Depends on how great your piece of paper or canvas is. And when it comes to tattooing, you're working on bodies, body parts like arms and legs and backs and necks and whatever. So that was a very difficult transition for me to work in a way that your compositions have to work like on a body part and not on a flat surface. And the last thing that really bothered, or not necessarily bothered, but was a great difficult point for me was learning how contrast works. Because when it comes to contrast on paper or when you're just drawing, you draw something and that's the way it is. You see is what you get. But when it comes to tattoos, ink flows a little bit in your body, because your body is a living organism, and so is your skin. So it lives and it moves and it gets older. So those are things you have to really really need to understand when you're working with your tattoos. And in my early days, I didn't really understand that the contrast you make during the tattoo session, that it doesn't necessarily stay that way over the time, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 15 years. So I really need to learn that contrast is a very big element, and you need to keep your open spaces and your readability and all that. And those are all things I'm not necessarily struggling still with, but things that are keeping in my mind. I just try to keep evolving that in a way that I never want to stop learning. I just want to keep improving on that, just make it more visible, make it so that it doesn't matter how old the tattoo is, it still looks like it's been done yesterday or something, which is, I don't think I don't think it will ever work that way, but it's something to look forward to.
Yeah. And like in the tattoo industry, I think it's also like the term of tattooer or tattoo artist. Do you like make a difference from this like words, and what do you consider yourself to be? Are you a tattooer artist, both?
Um, well, actually, if I'm being honest, I don't really like the term artist, because it sounds like you're I don't know, it's like a self-proclaimed title or something, and I don't like the idea of it. On the other hand, tattooer, it's just like maybe more of a job description, the same way you're saying I'm a graphic designer or I'm an illustrator. So in that sense, tattooer might be more fitting, but it also sends a signal like, I just do tattoos.
Yeah.
And you do want to give the impression when you're explaining your work to someone else that you're not just some simple, in a sense, not in a negative way, of course, simple tattooer who does like anything. You're really trying to communicate that you're actually a specialized artist in a specific style. So in that way, tattoo artist might be a more fitting title in a sense. But on the other hand, it does sound like you're making yourself a bigger deal than you are or something. I don't know, because it's not, for example, like when someone is like a very good web designer, they're saying I'm a web artist. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's a very weird term to give what you're to give yourself what you're trying to do. Most of the times when people ask me what I am, I still just say I'm an illustrator that also works as a tattooer or a tattoo artist, but I don't really cling to the title tattoo artist like that is who I am or so, because I don't really like the artist part of it or something.
Yeah, makes total sense. And now that you mention it, um, do you, because like tattooing is your main job right now, do you still find time to illustrate, to draw outside of your work? And like, is it still important for you, or do you feel like maybe like tattooing is already enough for you to, to express yourself creatively? How is it?
Yeah. Um, it is still a very important part of me, drawing in general. But like you said yourself, I don't really have the time anymore to draw just for me or drawing whatever I want to. So I really want to do more, but maybe I have to make more time for that or something. But on the other hand, I never have the feeling that drawing for customers or something is like taking a toll in the sense that I can't have the creative output anymore. It's still it's still always fascinates me. It's still driving me to do my better self and all that. But I do miss the time to really just be creative without the restrictions or the obligations for doing something for someone else, you know, because yeah, as a tattoo artist, it doesn't matter what you have to do, you still have to do it for someone else,
Mm.
which is fine. And I really love that about my work, because you know the best thing of doing my work is the smiles on everyone's faces when they look in the mirror and see their tattoos. You know, that just warms my heart. That's like, oh yeah, that is really one of the things I'm really doing this for. But on the other hand, you know, the main reason for doing this is for creating, you know, for drawing and all that stuff. So, and that is really something I miss nowadays, when I can just sit down, do my thing, and I don't have to worry about anyone liking it other than me and myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really miss that sometimes, but still, I can still find the creative output when it comes to my work.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. And when you like look of you on your work overall, like who or what does inspire you the most?
Oof. I think there are several tattoo artists and illustrators who really inspire me. I don't really know all their names, but I try not to stay fascinated on like one single person or just a few people, but more like their work in general, or like creative work like all around. So most of the times I just there's something I can do for like an hour on end, to just be on, like, for example, Pinterest or Instagram, and just watching other people make their work and saving it for later. And then at a moment when I have some time and need to get inspired, I just browse through all that work. I don't even remember who it is from, or what style it is. I just like, I like this image, or I like the way it flows, or how it looks, or the contrast, or whatever. But most things that didn't really inspire me are things out of mythology, like Japanese mythology, Japanese culture, a lot of fancy stuff. I'm a big nerd when it comes to that. So like, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, or mangas, or anime, movies, comic books. Those are all big sources of inspiration for me, and I try to browse through them as much as I can.
And now that you mention it, I wanted to ask you, and I know because you are interested in Japan, how
Mhm.
did it come about? How did you get interested in it?
Um, Oof, I can't really. Oh, that's a good question. I think it was when I was very young. I started doing karate because my father was a karate a master in his days, and he started, you know, hey, maybe you should do this too. So I started doing that, and I was very young, so I didn't really had any knowledge about like what the sport was or where it came from. I just liked doing it, and when I got older, I started to understand, and this came from Japan, and then I started to get to learn a thing or two about Japan, and okay, that's nice. And then came, you know, like anime and manga, and I was like, oh, I love this, you know, and I love the way the language sounds. And then I started to learn more about Japan, like, hey, it's really fascinating. And I don't know, that fascination just grew from a lot of standpoints, you know, like, for example, the karate and the anime and the manga, also the food. And I remember one time there was one of the first books I actually bought about Japan, which was about Bushido, you know, the way of the samurai, and it really fascinated me. And I like, oh, I love the, I don't know, the discipline, the principles, and I'm like, yeah, I really, it really fascinated me, the fact that it was a country with not necessarily strict but strong principles, and believing in those codes of honor, you know, and like, okay, I really love that about it. And it all confirmed for me when I actually visited Japan for the first time. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is exactly a little bit how I imagined it. Was somewhat of a culture shock, sure, but in a good sense, in a way, because everything was so structured and people were nice and humble, and I was like, yeah, this really just proved the point I was thinking all along, you know. And that's when my fascination for the country only escalated in a sense.
Yeah. And because like when I look at your art, sometimes there is some Japanese imagery in it.
Mhm.
Like, what do you like to draw? Like, which has Japanese imagery?
I think mostly especially when I look at like classical Japanese tattoos, I look to those images like a lot for inspiration, especially when I have to actually draw like a Japanese dragon, for example. I tend to look at Japanese dragons and not necessarily like dragons in general or how tattoo artists do them, but more like how does it look when an actual Japanese tattoo artist makes them, you know. And so and that is something I really love to do, you know, Japanese dragons, hanyas, the masks, you know, and everything that has a little bit of that folklore and mythology vibe to it. That's really what I love to do about it. One of my best friends from Amsterdam, Messa, is also a Japanese tattooer, but more in a blackwork kind of sense, you know. So he tries to do it all in a that the look and feel of his tattoos are like classical Japanese, but it is made in a way that it's more like blackwork and not necessarily with the bright colors and the very thick outlines, you know. And he also sometimes give me tips about, hey, you should check his work out, or hey, check out this, you know, to see to really understand how Japanese tattooing works, or that is their work's just cool, and like, hey, just check it out, and like, okay, cool, and that's where I take my inspiration from. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And you already, I think, talked a bit about it, but what is like your favorite medium to draw? What?
Ooh. Um, yeah, mostly ink, as it were, you know, like the East Indian ink. That was my favorite medium back then, and I rarely use it right now. But I think when I pick it up again, I'll just instantly fall in love with it again, because I mostly use an iPad nowadays for drawing,
Yeah.
basically for the fact because it's functional, you know, especially for client work, you know, you can just easy and quickly make something, redo something, make changes to them if it's necessary. But it's not necessarily my favorite type of medium because it's just, you know, all digital. There's no actually feeling to it. So if I ever have more time or make more time in a sense, I think I would pick up, you know, using ink again and
Mm.
just use some paper and just ink all the way.
Where do you buy it? Like maybe for people who are interested in getting into it, like trying it out. Do you have like any suggestions or recommend?
um, Yeah, it's mostly I used to buy it at our local art store. They have these like very small East Indian ink jars, as it were, and that's what I always used. And then if I wanted to use gray wash, then I just took a few cups of water and put a different amount of ink in it, and filled up the cups with water. So you had different shades of gray, as it were,
Mhm.
which is basically also how like gray wash in tattooing works, only with tattooing, of course. And but yeah, always bought my stuff locally. I didn't really thought about quality or something. The only thing I cared for is, does it serve the purpose I'm looking for? Yes, it does. Okay, then fine. I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing because I think many people like to try new things and it's like something like I've never heard about. So it's like really
Hmm.
interesting to hear. And what does usually your creative process look like? Whether it's like drawing for yourself or maybe for a client, you can choose like as an example, but like how does it start? How this idea comes to life?
Um.
Maybe even like, do you need something to be creative? Like, do you need like some environment, you know?
Yeah. I see. I see.
What's the behind the scenes?
Exactly. Well, The environment doesn't always need to be important for me. I know like a lot of artists like need to have that creative space, be it like an actual space or maybe their favorite drink or music or table or whatever. And I'm not really, in a sense, I don't really think that's all necessary for me myself to actually do something. I do need it in a sense if I have like this artist block or something, or I have like really trouble focusing on what I have to do. Then I really try to accommodate myself in a way that my creative thinking is stimulated and not distracted in a sense. But most of the times I just start with a blank canvas, as everyone does. And when it comes to client work, I just skim through all their information. And depending on how much information is given, I study it, or just like, okay, they want a snake or a wolf or a deer or something. Okay, fine, that's fair. And look at the imagery they're sending. Like some people just send like one image or two, and it's not necessarily something I need to hold on to, but more like an impression. And there are some people who just give me like a folder with 10 to maybe 20 images, or like an entire PowerPoint presentation, like, okay, this is my idea and these are all my inspirations, and I can work with either way, which is fine.
Which do you prefer?
I don't think I have an actual preference.
Okay.
I think it's easier for me to work with less, because then I'm not necessarily like thrown into a certain direction. Because when people give me a lot of images and they always tend to look a bit of the same, maybe same composition or style or whatever. And then I get a clear sense, okay, this is something you really want. And when people only send me like one or two, three images, then I'm like, okay, this is your basic idea, but I think I can have my own way with it. So in a sense, that's a lot easier, or not necessarily easier, but I prefer it a little bit more that way,
Mm.
because I have more freedom, or I have more sense of freedom. Yeah, and then once I get to know what their ideas are, I just start, just sketching all the way. Sometimes that takes like 5 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. Let's just work on this. And sometimes it can take like up to 2 hours or something. I'm just sketching all over, and like, no, this is not right, no, that doesn't feel right, no, the flow is wrong or something. And from there on, it's just like pretty standard, sketching and on reworking the design all the way to the end point. When my process is when it comes to my own work, when I'm actually just drawing for myself, for example, maybe flash work, or just me just doing some drawing, most of the times I just sit down, have some coffee or tea, depending on how late it is, of course. And then first, I just browse through all my folders of inspiration, not necessarily looking for anything, but just browsing, just viewing, like, oh, this is cool, oh, this is nice. And just to the point, I get like prickled in a sense, like, okay, I'm feeling it now. Yeah, I feel my creative high. So, and then I just start working. And most of the times, I'm not actually just working towards a goal, but I'm just just making shapes, I don't know, something abstract. And then I try to find something in the mess, and then it's one like, okay, oh yeah, maybe we're going this way. It's a little bit more freeing in a sense, because yeah, I'm just doing it for myself, so I don't have to go anywhere. And then I just rework all those areas, and until I have some concrete imagery, and like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to work with. Other times, especially when it comes with flashes, for example, the flash day we just had yesterday, I try to think more conceptually, because especially flash days we organize are sometimes based on a concept, especially when it is for like a charity case for someone. So we try to think in concepts. And when it comes on thinking about concepts, it's like, okay, this is the concept for this flash day. How can I use this concept for my drawings? And that's when I think more than drawing more. And then I just try to think of, like images about those concepts. So for, okay, maybe something with a raven, or something with this, or something with that. And I write them all down, and I just start sketching based on those ideas. And sometimes I have to scrap some ideas, like, okay, no, this just doesn't work. And sometimes I get new ideas based on something else entirely. And then I work through all those steps again until I have 5 or 8 flashes.
And how long does it usually take for you, like, to finish a piece?
Um, Depending on the complexity of the idea, sometimes I'm done in 2 hours,
Mm.
like sketching and making the design, and sometimes it can take up to 6 hours.
Mm.
It really depends on the idea, or maybe the day I'm having. Maybe I have a very slow day and it all just doesn't come to me easily on that day or something. But which is very ironic because sometimes my um, designing the or drawing the design takes up a lot more time than tattooing itself, because once you start tattooing you already have the design, so it's just in a sense copy and pasting,
Mhm.
but just making it more pretty, of course.
Yeah.
But the drawing process is sometimes, maybe even most of the times,
Mhm.
takes up a lot more time than the actual tattooing,
Yeah.
unless we're talking about like big projects like back pieces or something. That's just your design blown up 4 or 5 times.
That takes time.
That takes a lot of time. Yeah.
And now you also already mentioned like having a creative block, and I think as an artist, no matter whether it's music, art, anything, everybody
Mhm.
knows like creative block. How do you deal with it? Like, do you have maybe for people starting out a tip or advice how to deal with it, and what's your personal like way of dealing with creative blocks?
Hmm. I remember like when I was in art academy, I had some of these days or weeks, especially because you feel this pressure. Like I don't know, for example, a teacher is telling you, "Okay, you need to deliver me 40 sketches about this subject because that's something you want to research." And then you're like, 40 sketches. Okay, yeah, I have no idea where to begin. And you feel the block coming. And when I was younger, I sort of gave into the fact that I had this artist block and there was something like actually in front of me withholding me from doing anything. And nowadays I'm like, okay, there are some moments where you're just stuck, where there's nothing comes out. But I think the best way for me personally to deal with it is just keep on making, keep on doing something. Like even though if it doesn't resemble anything you want to accomplish or something. Like for example, if I have to work on a Japanese dragon for a customer,
Yeah.
and I'm sketching and I'm sketching and nothing comes out like at all. Like I have no inspiration or the flow doesn't work or whatever. And I'm realizing like, okay, I'm having an artist block now because like anything I do is absolute garbage. Then I just try to power through, and then eventually something will come up, even if it's something small, and then you'll get inspired again, or you find the drive to just go through, and that always helped me. And if it doesn't help with um like project based designs, then just start drawing on something like completely ordinary, like something for yourself, or maybe a scribble, just doing anything. That really helped me a lot going through those artist blocks. Just keep on working on it, because if you stop and accepting like, okay, having a block right now, I can't do anything, that doesn't really help you in a way. So
Mhm.
for me it always helps to just power through, in a sense, which is hard, of course. There are some times where you're just like, I don't know how to do this, but you just have to keep on going, even if it's just small things, or maybe for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I don't know, just power through.
That's amazing because I think like as creative, then you feel like, okay, I don't know, I just stop, and then you don't know
Yeah.
how long it will take until like motivation or inspiration come back. So it
Yeah.
can be dangerous, maybe even like, and for you are working with clients, like they
Yeah.
have an appointment, like if you just wait for like inspiration to come, it makes sense that you just find another way to deal with it. That's really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's really important, because like you said yourself, people tend to just stop at what they're doing and then just wait on the moment it's over or something, but it doesn't just magically stops or anything. Especially what I notice, like when other people having it, they just tend to wait, and then for some reason the block stops being there, and they just can get on start working again. And it's like if you just do that right when at the moment you start to notice you're having it, then you don't have to wait anymore. You can just
Mhm.
push through. It's a lot harder, of course. I understand that, and it may take a while, and it becomes frustrating. But I think it helps a lot more than just waiting it out, in a sense.
Makes totally sense, and I love this advice. And speaking of like struggles, what been your biggest challenge, maybe um, that you faced on your creative journey, whether it's tattooing or illustrating? Like when you think back, what is like the challenge you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge, which I'm still facing to this day, is balance in the sense of mental health and working on yourself and working on your craft. Because I tend to think of those two things like one of the same. You know, if I work on my craft, I feel happy, and I'm happy because I work on my craft. But especially when it comes to tattooing, it can take a big toll on you when you're like tattooing for 4 or 5 days a week and then drawing for 1 to 2 days a week, which leaves you some few hours during the week and then and a day in during the weekends to have like actually time off. It takes big toll on you, for especially on the days when you're actually feeling tired, or your or my girlfriend's saying like, hey, we don't have like a lot of time anymore, so shouldn't we do something? And you start to notice like, okay, I'm putting all this time and energy in my work and my craft and all that, and I have to try to balance it out, especially when it comes to my personal life. You know, like it's okay to take some rest or take a step back, or to say to a customer like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm getting overworked, I think we might need to postpone it or something. And it's something, and to this day I still really need to learn, because it's really hard for me to say no, or to find my personal boundaries when it comes to say, okay, stop, I'm having enough, I need to chill down for a minute. So that is the biggest hurdle I'm still trying to overcome, in a sense.
What helps you doing so?
I think other people around me,
Mhm.
they are like, they telling me like, hey man, you need to chill down for a second, because you're really doing too much. And most of the times, if I'm being truly honest to myself, most of the times I'm not even listening. I'm just saying, yeah, 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 you're right. And then
Yeah.
the next day I'm just doing my business as usual. But like, especially my girlfriend is saying like, for example, like, hey, maybe we should just do nothing for today, like don't see anyone, just you and me chilling, maybe go out to dinner or something, just us. And on those days I can actually feel like the rest coming to me, like, oh yeah, I needed this.
Mm.
And that those are the moments, and especially people around me are like driving me like, hey man, just chill down. They're being the biggest help for me when it comes to overcoming that hurdle.
And I think even like for creative people, like having like this imposter syndrome, like having not enough, having done not enough, I think it's easy to get stuck in this creative rut. Like I need to do more. It's not enough yet. I cannot
Mm,
rest until something, I don't know, something happens, until I feel I deserve rest.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. That is something that, yeah, it depends on the person, of course. Like some people have it worse than others, and I tend to have it like on the worst side, because like my girlfriend and even my colleagues at work are saying like, hey, maybe you should just work a day less, so you have like a day extra for doing your drawings and your designs, which automatically gives you a day extra in the weekends, which gives you more time, gives you a lot more space in your head and maybe some rest. I know that they're right, but on the other hand, I feel this nagging thing in my brain saying, yeah, but yeah, you're just only working for 3 or 4 days, which isn't really enough, Like, what if people are trying to think that you're saying you're lazy or something, or that just, yeah, oh really, you have a good life, just working 3 or 4 days a week, and then like exactly what you're saying, you feel this imposter syndrome coming up, like you're not doing enough, you need to work harder, and you need to show people that you really love to work hard and something. And I then you totally tend to forget like the fact that, hey man, it's like a good thing to chill and to take a step back and take some time for yourself. And yeah, I tend to forget that a lot,
Mm.
definitely.
Yeah. No, that's really important that we mention it and you mention it, because I think like it's what everybody, like every creative person, but maybe even people from other industries like go through.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, on a more positive note, what would you say is your biggest achievement until now that you're proud of? But forget the imposter syndrome, like.
That's a good question. It's really, that's really hard. The biggest achievement to this day is the fact that when I went from apprentice to artist, in a sense, like back when I was an apprentice, I wasn't worrying about titles or anything. I was just worrying about doing my work and as good as possible. And then on a day, the owners, Kevin and Hannah, and my girlfriend, they surprised me at Black Bear at our tattoo shop by sending me towards the other space we had, which is a small like studio in a sense where we keep all our stuff for the merchandise and things. And they lured me there, and then all of a sudden, all my friends were there, and I was like, "What is going on? What's going on here?" And that was the moment when they told me like, "You can drop the apprenticeship title now. You're an official artist." And in some strange way, that meant a lot more to me than receiving my diploma for my art academy.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think maybe it had to do with the fact that the art academy was like 4 years of hard work, and then you just wanted to be over or something. And when I went from apprenticeship or apprentice to artist, it was like some form of validation you had, like, hey, you did good. Your work is good. So here's your new title or something. And that was the first time I was actually like, yeah, oh wow, oh, I really did it, didn't I? And that, I think that's one of the biggest achievements I had so far, I guess. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I still remember because I've been following you since you were an apprentice and I didn't even know. So
Mm.
I think you posted that you've been like, you finished the
Yeah.
apprenticeship and you're being an artist. I think I even
Mm.
commented like, how can it be that you've been an apprentice? Because like your art was so amazing. I was shocked. Like, how can it be? So
Yeah, yeah.
no, that's
Yeah, it's still yeah, a lot of people didn't know it back then because like I said, I didn't really care for it. I just tried to focus on my work, and it didn't matter back then. It didn't really matter to me the fact if I was still an apprentice or that I wasn't an artist yet. I was like as long as the work is good, then I'm happy, you know. And if people are happy with my work, then yeah, that's all what mattered to me. But yeah, when it actually happened for me for becoming an artist, it was like, oh yeah, this means a lot more to me than I than I realized in a strange way.
maybe even having your friends around and like people like being there for you for your journey maybe even help
Yeah.
to feel that way.
I think that helped a great deal. Exactly. Yeah. Like people around me, like feeling, yeah, happy for me or something.
Proud.
And yeah, it makes you feel warm inside and like, oh yeah, I actually, I almost, yeah, like was getting emotional, you know, and tearing. I'm like, oh wow, oh you're all here for me. Oh wow. I don't know. It was so weird, and yeah, I was very happy back then. Yeah, it really felt like like a great achievement. Definitely.
Amazing. Yeah, and is there anything you want to achieve in future? Is there anything like a goal you have?
I think, yeah, I'm not really sure. I tend not to look too far in the future, but just taking things a few steps at a time. I would love to travel more with my work. You know, doing a lot more guest spots, like in all the cool places around the world. That is something like really on my wish list, and one of the things I really want to accomplish. You know, just not necessarily for myself as an artist, but more, to get to know other people around the world and doing the craft, learning how they do their thing. And, in a sense, I never want to stop learning. I want to keep improving on what I do. So it would be like awesome for me to just go to other places, for example, to Japan or something, and just get to know like the true masters of, Japanese tattooing, or going to Berlin or America, New York, London, you know, getting to know all these great names in the tattoo industry and just to see how they work. That would be like something I would really like to do in the future.
Sounds really good. And I think it's like very achievable for you because you're already on a really good start for that.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, what I wanted also to ask it, if you could start over, would you do everything the same? What would you do differently?
If I could start over, ooh, if I could start over, I would probably, knowing all the things I would know now, I would try to prevent any mistakes I made in the past during my apprenticeship. You know, in a sense, like trying. It may sound silly trying to skip a few steps if I already know how to skip them.
Mm.
But on the other hand, I don't regret anything I've done. Like regretted maybe some tattoos or some choices I made. But on the other hand, I'm like, those were all learning experiences for me, which I had to go through to be where I am today. So in a sense, they were crucial. So I think I think I would do like most of the things like exactly the same.
Mm. No, that's great. That's like maybe
Thank you.
like even the best thing to like the best answer if you don't have any regrets of your past
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
journey. And do you have any advice for beginners, whether it's like illustrations, tattooers? What would be like advice you wish somebody had told you when you were starting out?
Um, Keep practicing. Work on your craft like as many hours as you can without sacrificing your rest.
Mm.
Like when I was younger or starting, I was just trying to do as much as possible, as many as possible, and it most of the times it always crushed me like for my own personal mental state. So the biggest tip I would give to beginners is like practice as hard as you can, as much as you can, but never forget the fact that you're still a human being and you need to rest, and sometimes just take a little step back so you can make two steps forward.
Really, really important. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to ask you is what is
Yes.
your why? Why do you do what you do?
Why? Why? Saving the difficult one for
Yeah.
last. I think the biggest why is it because it makes me happy. During the last quarantine lockdown for Corona, I had a kind of a breaking point in a sense because I started to notice that the fact that I couldn't tattoo anymore and I didn't know when I could start again was making me like very unhappy, like almost depressing in a sense. So I started to understand that doing my work and doing my craft is what gives me the absolute joy. And like I said earlier, like seeing the validation of people like having smiles on their faces when they see their tattoos, that yeah, that's one of the reasons I do what I'm doing. And when I can't do that anymore, it just breaks my heart. You know, it makes me depressed, and in a sense gives me the biggest artist block there is to that I ever had. So I'm doing this because in a sense, I think this is what I have to do to keep on living. In a sense, I don't know. It sounds very dramatic, but it drives me forward. So it's not another sense of why I do it, but I just have to, in a sense.
Mm. That's amazing. So I love this answer so much. So thank you so much for taking your time to be here. And I'm sure it will be really, really inspiring for people who just get started out, no matter whether they are tattooers or like
Mhm.
just artists or anybody. It's so important, like everything you said. So thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you to you for this great opportunity. I had a really wonderful time, and I hope it's helpful in any way it can be.
Will be for sure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.